Welcome everyone to this live podcast on Twitch where you can get the news from the research industry. That's how our researcher keep on researching on different various topics as well as providing our life more easier than our traditional methods of lives. Uh, and this podcast is for those listeners who are not able to read this those articles in their free time due to busy scheduling, of course. And yes, these articles are posted on our website named postscientist.com. If you are willing to check it out, please check it out. Otherwise, listen to this podcast. It's enough for the day because it acts like an archive on the daily basis. We are providing you on. Yep. So let's get started without wasting any time. Set chain an application that multiplies by 1,000 the number of transactions per minute in any blockchain. Hmm. Okay. Researcher Margarita Caprito, Martin Crescia, MDA Software, Antonio Fernandez, Anta, MDA Networks, Antonio Russo, MDA Networks, and Cesar Senzes, MDA Software, presented SetChain, a new data structure that improves the scalability of blockchains, allowing a great number of transactions per block, which leads to a reduction in risk and cost for users at the 2022 IEEE International Conference on Blockchain. Modern blockchains employ a smart contract program that describes the functionality of transaction. With them, user can observe the details of a transaction from start to finish, generating not only greater confidence but also greater efficiency as well as more opportunities. The information of the Byzantine consensus algorithm to avoid attack generated a limitation in the number of transactions inserted in the chain. Hence, there is a growing interest in improving the scalability of blockchain, that is improving the performance of the blockchain network to phase of a higher number of transactions. In this sense, the research team of IMDA Software and IMDA Networks has carried out a joint work that is reflected in the paper Set Chain Improving Blockchain Scalability with Byzantine Distributed Sets and Barriers, and in the development of set chain application. The study is the result of a collaboration agreement between IMDA Software, the Tesos Foundation, Nomadic Labs, with the aim of meeting the needs of the ecosystem and contributing to the development of Tezos technology. According to Margarita Caprito, a pre-doctoral research at IMDA Software Institute, right now a blockchain like the Ethereum only allows 8,000 transactions per minute, while Visa, for example, reaches 1 lakh. The difference is abysmal. That is why we have worked to create an application that allows us to achieve breakthrough in this aspect and that can also be applied to any blockchain, not just Tesos. The main advantage of sidechain versus a classical blockchain is the scalability. Of course, explains Antonio Fernandez and a research professor at IMDA Network Institute. The result of their research shows that if various conceptual visualization of the boundary between blocks are not needed too often, not no more than once per second. Sidechains allow millions of new transactions to be added, whereas blockchains can usually only add thousands. He adds sidechains allows to store transaction permanently and reliably, introducing order between transaction when it is indispensable. It can be used instead of blockchain when total order between records or transaction is not required, as order in this application is enforced when it is essential to introduce barriers between set of records. Set chain achieves ordering of the blocks within the chain without requiring the transaction within the blocks to be ordered. The process works more efficiently and save money for blockchain users. Next steps. The author of the study believes that sidechain can be used to implement a solution to be so-called for front running, which is the action of observing a transaction request and maliciously injecting another one just like it before the observed ones are executed. In order to make a profit, this is achieved by paying a higher fee to miner. Meme polls are in charge of encoding the information of what is about to happen in the blockchain, so anyone observing this data can predict the following transaction and act in the favor. Fernandez and warns that although set chain application are systems used by multiple entities that have to collaborate may have conflicting interest. Of course, set chain will provide them with a respo- repository that allows them to share data without the risk of any of them manipulating it to their advantage. Okay. The IMDA software and IMDA networks research team believes that their application can detect front running and act as mechanism to build a more efficient meme pool that encrypts transaction requests using multi-signature. Research professor Antonio Fernandez Anta comments that the main conclusion they have reached is precisely that in blockchain the total order requirements are often too restrictive when most applications do not need them. Relaxing these requirements can lead to huge performance giants. So, of course, so these are the application. This is the one of the best example, or one of the to improve the blockchain technology, because otherwise, it is also explained in the article itself that Visa uh, can Visa platform can transfer data or transfer information or done transaction 1 lakh. In same case, it is been done in blockchain just 40 or 60,000. So if we gonna increase those scalability, so we need some of these, sorry, of like Ethereum. He said it's just through proof of concept through various channels, it's have done 8,000 transactions, while in the Visa it reaches around 1 lakh. So I mean, it's the one of the greatest possibilities that not greatest possibilities, it's one of the best example to improve the uh, uh, blockchain system, to provide them the to execute faster, of course, because we all know that we need to provide the miscellaneous fees or the gas fees, whatever you may say, but these are the fees we are going to put it. And also, of course, 8,000 is a very large is a very less transaction in comparison to many Visa or many other companies which are running on a traditional fiat currencies. So if you wanted to increase it or increase the scalability of the transaction, so it is the requirement of in the blockchain itself. So I mean, great application. Without, okay, I guess it's enough for the article, or enough for the topic. Moving on towards next topic. Magnetic field helps thick battery electrode tackle electric vehicle challenges. Hmm. As electric vehicles grows in popularity, the spotlight shines more brightly on some of their remaining major issues. Researchers at the University of Texas at Austin are tackling two of the bigger challenges facing electric vehicles: limited range and slow recharging. The researcher fabricated a new type of electrode for lithium ion batteries that could unleash greater power and faster charging. They did this by creating thicker electrodes, the positively and negatively charged part of the battery, that delivered power to a device using magnets to create a unique alignment that side steps common problems associated with sizing up these critical components. The result is an electrode that could potentially facilitate twice the range on a single charge for an electric vehicle compared with a battery. Using an exciting commercial electrode, two-dimensional material are commonly believed as a promising candidate for a higher rate energy storage application because it's only need to be several nanometers thick for rapid charge transport, said Guazhu Yu, a professor in UT Austin Walker Department of Mechanical Engineering and Texas Material Institute. However, for thick electrode design based next generation high energy batteries, the restacking of nanosheets as building blocks can cause significant bottlenecks in charge transport, leading to difficulty in achieving both high energy and fast charging. The key to the discovery, published in the Proceeding of the National Academy of Sciences, uses thin two-dimensional material as the building blocks of the electrodes, stacking them to create thickness and then using a magnetic field to manipulate their orientations. The research team used commercially available magnets during the fabrication process to arrange the two-dimensional materials in a vertical alignment, creating a fast lane for ions to travel through the electrode. Typically, thicker electrodes force the ions to travel longer distances to move through the battery, which leads to slower charging time. The type the typical horizontal alignment of the layers of material that make up the electrode force the ions to snake back and forth. Our electrode shows superior electrochemical performance, partially due to high mechanical strength, high electrical conductivity, and facilitated lithium ion transport thanks to the unique architecture we designed, said Xingwen Zhou, a graduate student and use research group who is leading this project. In addition to comparing their electrode with a commercial electrode, they also fabricated a horizontal arranged electrode using the same material for experimental control purposes. They were able to recharge the vertical thick electrode to 50% energy level in 30 minutes. Compared with 2 hours and 30 minutes with the horizontal electrode, the researchers emphasized they are early in their work in this area. They look at just a single type of battery electrode in this research. Their goal is to generalize their methodology of vertically organized electrode layers to apply it to different types of electrodes using other materials. This could help the technique between more widely adopted in industries, so it could enable future fast charging yet high energy batteries that power electric vehicles. So of course it's again we are using the magnetic field to helps thick battery electrodes in the electric vehicle challenges. So yeah, okay, moving on towards the next topic. Engineers build a battery field wireless underwater camera. Hmm. Scientists estimate that more than 95% of Earth's oceans have never been observed, which means we have been seen less of our planet's ocean, that we have the far side of the moon or the surface of Mars. The high cost of powering an underwater camera for a longer time by threatening it to a research vessel or sending a ship to recharge its batteries is a steep challenge preventing widespread undersea exploration. MIT researchers have taken a major step to overcome this problem by developing a battery-free wireless underwater camera that is about 1 lakh times more energy efficient than other undersea cameras. The device takes color photos even in dark underwater environments and transmit image data wirelessly through the water. The autonomous camera is powered by sound. It converts mechanical energy from sound waves traveling through water into electrical energy that powers its imaging and communication equipment. After capturing and encoding image data, the camera also uses sound waves to transmit data to a receiver that reconstructs the image. Because it doesn't need a power source, the camera could run for weeks on end before retrieval, enabling scientists to search remote parts of the ocean for new species. It could also be used to capture images of ocean pollution or monitor the health and growth of fish raised in aquaculture farms. One of the most exciting applications of this camera, for me personally, is in the context of the climate monitoring. We are building climate models, but we are missing data from over 95% of the ocean. This technology could help us build more accurate climate models and a better understanding how climate change impacts the underwater world, says Fadel Adib, associate professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science and director of the Signal Kinetic Groups in the MIT Media Lab and senior author of the paper. Joining Adib on the paper are co-lead authors and Signal Kinetic Group research assistants Saeed Saad Afzal, Walid Akbar, and Oswi Rodriguez, as well as research scientist Unso Ha and former group researcher Mario Domit and Reza Geffri Vadagaf. The paper is published in Nature Communications. Hmm. Going by Triffy. To build a camera that could operate autonomously for a longer period, the researcher needed a device that could harvest energy underwater on its own while consuming very little power. Of course, the camera acquires energy using transducers made from physio piezoelectric material that are placed around its exterior. Piezoelectric material produce an electrical signal when a mechanical force is applied to them. When a sound traveling through the water hits the transducer, they vibrate and convert that mechanical energy into electrical energy. Those sound waves could come from any source like a passing ship or money life. The camera stores harvest energy until it has built up enough to power the electronics that takes photos and communicate data. To keep power consumption as low as possible, the researcher used off-the-shelf ultra-low power imaging sensor, but the sensor only captured grayscale images, and since most underwater environments lack a light source, they needed to develop a lower push flash too. We were trying to minimize the hardware as much as possible. That creates new constraints on how to build the system, send information, and perform image reconstruction. It took a fair amount of creativity to figure out how to do this, Adib says. They solved both problems simultaneously using red, green, and blue LEDs. When the camera captures an image, it shines a red LED and then uses image sensor to take the photo. It repeats the same process with green and blue LEDs. Even though the image looks black and white, the red, green, and blue color light is reflected in the white part of each photo, Akbar explains. When the image data are combined in post processing, the color image can be reconstructed. When we were kids in art class, we were taught that we could make all colors using three basic colors. The same rules follow the color images we see on our computers. We just need red, green, blue. These three channels to reconstruct color images, he says. Sending data with sound. Once image data are captured, they are encoded as bits, ones and zeros, and sent to receiver one bit at a time using process and called underwater backscatter. The receiver transmits sound waves through the water to the camera, which acts as a mirror to reflect those waves. The camera either reflects as a wave back to the receiver or changes its mirror to an observer so that it does not reflect back. A hydrophone next to the transmitter senses if a signal is reflected back from the camera. If it receives a signal, that is a bit 1, and if there is no signal, that is bit 0. The system uses this binary information to reconstruct and post-process the image. This whole process, since it is required a single switch to convert the device from a non-reflective state to a reflective state, consumes 5 order of magnitude less power than typical underwater communication system, Afzal says. The researcher tested the camera in several underwater environments. In one, they captured color image of plastic bottle floating in a new hemisphere pond. They were also able to take such high quality photos of a African starfish that tiny tubercles along its arm were clearly visible. The device was also effective at repeatedly imaging the underwater plant Apno, Apnogeton Alvasius in a dark environment over the course of a week to monitor its growth. Now that they have demonstrated a working prototype, the researcher plan to enhance the device so it is practical for deployment in real world settings. They want to increase the camera memory so it could capture photos in real time, stream images, or even shoot underwater video. They also want to extend the camera range. They successfully transfer data 40 meters from the receiver, but pushing that range wider would enable the camera to be used in more underwater settings. Okay, okay. Uh, Moving on towards next topic, being lonely and unhappy accelerates aging more than smoking, study finds. Okay, let's see. Molecular damage accumulates and contributes to the development of aging related fertility and serious diseases. In some people, these molecular processes are more intense than in others, a condition commonly referred to as accelerated aging. Fortunately, the increased pace of aging may be detected before its disastrous consequence manifest by using digital modes of aging clocks. Such models can also be used to derive an anti-aging therapies on individual and population levels. According to the latest article published in Aging US, and anti-aging therapy need to focus on one's mental health as much as one's physical health, and international collaboration led by deep longevity with the US and Chinese scientists has measured the effect of being lonely, having restless sleep, or feeling unhappy on the pace of aging and found it to be significant. The article features a new aging clock trained and verified with blood biometric data of 11,914 Chinese adults. This is the first aging clock to be trained exclusively on a Chinese cohort of such volume. Aging acceleration was detected in people with a history of stroke, liver and lung diseases, smokers, and most interestingly, people in a vulnerable mental state. In fact, feeling hopeless, unhappy, and lonely was shown to increase one biological age more than smoking. Other factors linked to age acceleration include being single and living in rural area due to the low availability of medical services. The author of the article conclude that the psychological aspect of aging should not be neglected either in research or in practical anti-aging application. According to Manuel Feria from Stanford University, mental and psychological states are some of the most robust predictors of health outcomes and quality of life, yet they have largely been omitted from modern healthcare. Alexa Zernzov, the CEO of In Silico Medicine, points out the study provides a course of action to slow down or even reverse psychological aging on a national scale. Earlier this year, Deep Longevity released an AI guided mental health web service, Future Self.ai, that is based on a preceding publication in Aging using US. The service offered a free psychological assessment that is processed by an AI and provides a comprehensive report on a user's psychological age as well as current and future mental well-being. Deepan Deepankar Nayak, the CEO of Deep Longevity, affirms future self AI is combination with the study of old Chinese adults, position Deep Longevity at the forefront of the gerontological research. Deep Longevity developed the longevity as a service LAS solution to integrate multiple deep biomarkers of aging, dubbed deep aging clocks, to provide a universal multifactorial measure of human biological age. So, these are the findings, these are the studies given by the researchers that how and unhappy and lonely people are more likely to be aged earlier and more, of course, can lead to death more frequently instead of those who are living happily, living with their family members, living with their friends and everything. So yeah, moving on towards next topic: language learning difficulty in children's linked to brain differences. Interesting, right? Let's see. Developmental language disorder (DLD) is an extremely common disorder affecting approximately 2 children in every classroom. Children with DLD struggle to comprehend and use their native language, facing trouble with grammar, vocabulary, and holding conversation. Their language difficulty considerably increase the risk of having difficulties when learning to read, underachieving academically, being unemployed, and facing social and mental health challenges. In research published in the journal eLife, Dr. Saloni Krishnan and colleagues used MRI brain scans that were specifically sensitive to different properties of the brain tissue. For example, the scans measure the amount of myelin and iron in the brain. Myelin is a fatty substance that wraps around neurons and speed up transmission of signals between brain areas. It is like the insulation around electrical cables. The research demonstrated that children with DLD have less myelin in parts of the brain responsible for acquiring rules and habits, as well as those responsible for language production and comprehension. Dr. Krishnan Reader, Royal Holloway, University of London, who lead the study as a research fellow at the University of Oxford, says that DLD is a relatively unknown and understudied condition, unlike better known neurodevelopmental conditions such as ADHD, di- dyslexia, or autism. This work is an important first step in understanding the brain mechanism of this disorder. Okay. Senior author Kate Watkinson, professor of cognitive neuroscience at the University of Oxford, says that this type of scan tells us more about the makeup composition of the brain tissue in different areas. The findings might help us understand the pathways involved at a biological level and ultimately allow us to explain why children with DLD have problems with language learning. More studies are needed to determine if these brain differences cause language problems and how or if experiencing language difficulty could cause these changes in the brain. Further research may help scientists find new treatment that target these brain differences. Okay. So these are the findings once again given by the researchers, or that how language learning is difficult in children, in infant children, when or the initial stage of lives. So these are the differences between us and them. Yep, of course. So okay, moving on towards next topic. New study IDs, what brings our senses and thoughts together. Hmm. Our ability to think, decide, remember recent events and mood comes from our brain neocortex. Now, University of California Irvine neuroscientists have discovered key aspects of the mechanism behind these functions. Their findings could ultimately help improve treatment for certain neuropsychiatric disorders and brain injuries. The study appears in Neuron. Scientists have long known the neurocortex integrates what are called feed forward and feedback information streams. Feed forward data is relayed by the brain sensory systems from the periphery or senses to the neocortex higher order areas. These high level brain regions then send feedback information to refine and adjust sensory processing. This back and forth communication allows the brain to pay attention, restrain short term memories, and make decisions. A simple example is when you want to cross a busy road, said corresponding author Georgi Lur, PhD and professor of neurobiology and behavior in the School of Biological Sciences. There are trees, people, moving vehicles, traffic signal signs, and more. Your higher level neocortex tells a sensory system which merit attention for deciding when to go across. The interaction between higher and lower level systems also allows us to remember what you saw when you glanced both ways to gather the information. If you didn't have the short term memory, you would just keep looking back and forth and never move, he said. In fact, in our feed forward and feedback streams weren't constantly working together, we would do very little except respond by reflexes. Until now, scientists have not been sure how neurons in the brain participate in the complex processes. Lord and his colleagues discovered that feed forward and feedback signal converge onto signal neurons in the partial regions of the neocortex. The research also found that distinct types of cortical neurons merge. The two information streams are markedly different timescales and identified the cellular and circuit architecture underpinning these differences. Scientists already knew that integrating multiple senses enhances neuronal responses. Lur said, if you only see something or just hear it, your reaction time is lower than when experiencing them with both senses simultaneously. We have identified the underlying mechanism making this possible. He noted that the study data suggests the same principle apply if one information stream is sensory and the other is cognitive. Understanding this process is critical for developing future treatments for psychiatric ailments like sensory processing disorders, synchroprenia, and ADHD, as well as for strokes and other injuries to the neocortex. Lud is a fellow of the Center of the Neurobiology of Learning and Memory, the Center for neural circuit mapping, and the scent of hearing research at UC Irvine. PhD candidate Daniel Rindgard, who performed all neural recordings and biological tissues, work served as the paper first author. Archana Prudator, PhD or postdoctoral scholar in the lab and second author on the paper, conducted computational modeling that lead to the mechanist understanding of the process, integrating sensory and cognitive information streams. Hmm. Okay, so moving on towards next topic, because of course it's being well described by the author itself. So, yep. A magneto-optic modulator could facilitate the development of next generation superconductor based computers. Interesting, right? Let's see. In the future, many computers will most likely to be based on electronic circuits made of superconductor. These are materials through which an electrical current can flow without energy losses. Could be very promising for the development of high performance supercomputers computers and quantum computers. Researcher at University of California, Santa Barbara, Raytheon BBN Technology, University of Calgary, Microsoft Research, and the Tokyo Institute of Technology have recently developed a magneto-optic modulator device that controls the properties of a light beam through a magnetic field. This device, introduced in a paper published in Nature Electronics, could contribute to the implementation of large-scale electronics and computer based on superconductors. We are working on a new technology that can speed up high performance supercomputers and quantum computer based on superconductor technology. Paolo Pintas, the researcher who lead the study called Tech Explorer superconductor work probably only at low temperatures, generally just above absolute zero, minus 27 3.15 degrees Celsius. Because of this, circuit made of these material must be kept inside a dedicated refrigerator. Circuit made of superconductor are typically connected to the external surrounding using metal cables. These cables have a limited communication speed and can transfer heat into a cold circuit. A promising alternative would be to use optical fiber, thin and flexible glass wires that can convey light signals and are currently used to bring internet data over long distances. These fibers offer two main advantages over metal cables. They can transmit 1000 times more data within the same period of time without transferring heat, since glass is a good thermal insulator. As part of our work, we designed a fabricated device known as optical modulator that converts information carried by an electrical current in an electromagnet into light, Pintas explained. This is thanks to a physical mechanism called magneto-optic effect. This light can travel through an optical fiber and carry information out of the cold environment without altering the functionality of the cold circuit. Optical modulators, such as the devices created by Pintas and his colleagues, allows researchers to control the properties of light beams so that they can transfer information in the form of optical signals. These modulators have numerous potential applications, for instance, allowing the transmission of binary 1 and 0 codes over long distances. The magneto-optic modulator created by the researcher uses an electrical current to generate a magnetic field. This magnetic field, in turn, induce a charge in optical properties of a synthetic garnet where light is propagating. The mechanism underpinning our modulator is analogous to a guitar player who changes the stiffness of the strings to play a different sound. Pinter said, in our case, the magnetic field controls the optical density of the medium where the light is traveling, such that when the light can propagate, we get a 1, and when the light is entered, we have a 0, of course. In initial evaluation, the magneto-optic modulator created by Pintos and his colleague achieved highly promising results. Most notably, it reached a relative fast modulation speed, a few gigabits per second, and could operate at temperature as low as 4K minus 269.15 degrees Celsius. This is the key component to enable energy efficient large data transfer rate from superconducting circuits operating inside a Cryostat at low temperature and room temperature, Pinter said. Normally, optical modulators are based on a few electro-optic efforts where an electric field changes the optical property of the material where the light is propagating. The magneto-optic effect that we use, on the other hand, is a dual effect where a magnetic field changes the optical property of a medium. Although the magneto-optic effect is well known and extensively studied, Pintus and his colleagues were among the few who investigated its potential value for creating modulators. This area had not been explored much before because manufacturing integrated magneto-optic devices and applying fast-time variant magnetic fields can be very challenging. In addition, the magneto-optic effects tends to be associated with the significantly slower response time than electro-optic effects. Ours is the first proof of concept of a high-speed modulator based on a magneto-optic effect, Pinter said. With this modulator, we demonstrate a key building block to enable effective communication between cryogenic environment and room temperature electronics using optical fibers. Compared to previous cryogenic electro-optic modulator, our proposed solution has a very simple structure and it is compatible with a superconducting circuit since the input electrical impedance is very small. The promising performance and cryogenic nature of the researcher modulator make it suitable for connecting standard electronics at room temperature with cryogenic superconducting and quantum computer architecture. In the future, the recently studied could pave the way for new research focusing on magneto-optic modular for optical modulation and on the potential computing application. In our work, we demonstrate a modulation rate of 2 gigabit per second with energy consumption below 4 picojoule per bit of transferred information, which could be reduced by 80 times below 50 femtojoule per bit. By optimizing the fabrication process in the same material system, Pintus added, although this performance is impressive, we believe there is a lot of room for further improvements. In our next works, we would likely like to explore other materials to achieve higher modulation rate and lower power consumption. The field of cryogenic magneto-optic material is an unexplored area, and it will take more investigation to narrow down the most promising materials. Hmm. Okay, moving on towards next archaeology article where we can find once again talking about the ancient Maya civilization. Not just for the gods, new insight on the use of Kakua among the ancient Maya. Hmm. It was the money that grows on trees. Okay, said to be gift from the gods, said to be a gift from the gods. Kakua from the ancient Maya was considered scared, used not only as currency but in special uh, ceremonies and religious rituals. It's the progenitor plant of chocolate, and notions of luxury are embedded in its lore. The prevailing belief cacao was more available to even controlled by the society very upper echelons royalty. Past efforts to identify cacao in ceramics focused on highly dero, decorative vessels associated with elite ceremonial context. Think ornate drinking vases, leading to assumption about how cacao was distributed and who could access it. What about the farmers who grew cocoa and the communities of people who lived amongst these orchards? What of the general populace? A new study of UC Center Barbara researcher Hannibal Ford and Mentharjana the various ask these questions and answer them by examining cocoa residues from ancient ceramics. The result published in the proceeding of the National Academy of Sciences demonstrated that cocoa was in fact accessible to the general populace and was used in celebration at all levels of society. It had been assumed that cocoa for the Maya was an elite exclusive, said Ford, an anthropologist and director of the Mesoamerican Research Center at UC Santa Barbara, who for 40 years has been conducting research on the ancient Maya city of El Pilar. We now know that this is not the case. The imbling of cacao was a luxury accessible to all. The importance is that it was requirement of the ritual associated with it. Of course, to test the exclusive of cocoa, use the work examines 54 archaeological ceramic shards originating from El Pilar, located between Belize and Guatemala. The shards can be traced to late classic period civic and residential context, representing a cross section of ancient Maya inhabitants. The study includes a chemical analysis of the shards, specifically of the biomarkers for cocoa, caffeine, theobromine, and theophylline. The discovery of a chemical signature of a cacao made the investigation possible, but the main active ingredient, theobromine, it turns out, is not sufficiently discrete to be certain of the cocoa attribution, said Ford. Manthajana, the various and his students in the chemical research encountered the possibilities of detecting theophylline, a specific component of cocoa that could not be confused with anything else. His work was not archaeological, but he saw the potential for an interdisciplinary project. A distinguished professor and department chair of chemistry and biochemistry at UC Santa Barbara, the various has been long studying how DNA bases, the building blocks of life, and similar molecules respond to UV light, and he said whether UV light could have played a role on early Earth in the way nature selected those building blocks from a primordial soup of many much compounds. At some point, I realized that some of the compounds we had been studying in the origin of life chemistry project occurred in cocoa and thus can serve as biomarkers for cocoa, the various said. Since we had already investigated the spectroscopy of these compounds in great detail, this presented an opportunity to apply the expertise to detection of these biomarkers for archaeology. We can find a needle in a haystack provided we know what the needle looks like. In this case, the largest molecule was a certain biomarker for cocoa. He added that ability is what made this analysis possible. In their selections of ceramic to test for and the various prioritized the vases from which cocoa was likely drunk. They also tested bowls, jars, and plates. All vessel types had evidence of cocoa. This was surprise at first, Ford said, but giving through the presence and understanding of their uses, bowl would be good for mixing, jars would be right for warming the drink, a traditional cocoa preparation, and plates appropriate for serving food with sauces that can contain cocoa, such as mole poblano. Now that we know that the presence of cocoa is in all vessel types, we need to understand the greater distribution and use of the important household forms for added. What is critical in our work is that the data I collected is the El Pilar Belize River area emphasizes the ordinary household and not just the elite center. Our research thus break ground on the identification and the distribution. Hmm. Okay. Moving on towards next topic. Physics shed light on a different kind of chaos. Okay. Physicists at UC Santa Barbara, the University of Maryland, and University of Washington have found an answer to the long-lasting physics question: how to interparticle interaction after dynamically localization. Hmm. It's really old also inherited from condensed matter physics, said David Weld, an experimental physicist at UCSB with specialties in ultra cold atomic physics and quantum simulation. The question the caution falls into the category of many body physics, which interrogates the physical properties of a quantum system with multiple interacting parts. While many body problems have been a matter of research and debate for decades, the complexity of these systems with quantum behaviors such as superposition and entanglement lead to multitudes of possibilities, making it possible to solve the through calculation alone. Many aspects of the problem beyond the reach of modern computers. Well added. Fortunately, this problem was not beyond the reach of an experiment that evolves ultra cold lithium atoms and lasers. So what emerges when you introduce interaction in a disorder chaotic quantum system, a weird quantum state according to Weld. It's a state which is anom- anomalous with properties which in some sense lie between the classical prediction and non-interacting quantum prediction. The physicist's results are published in the journal Nature Physics. Something strange is going on. When it comes to strange counterintuitive behavior, the quantum world does not disappoint. Take for instance a regular pendulum which would behave exactly how we would expect it to when subjected to pulses of energy. If you kick it and shake it up and down every once in a while, a classical pendulum will continuously absorb energy, start to wiggle all over the place and explore the whole parameter space chaotically. Well said. In quantum system, chaos looks different. Instead of movement, disorder can bring particles to a kind of standstill, and while a kicked quantum pendulum or rotor might first absorb energy from the kick, similar to a classical pendulum with repeated kicks, the system stops absorbing energy and momentum distribution freezes in what's known as a dynamically localized states. The localization is closely analogous to the behavior of a dirty electronic solid, in which disorder results in immobile localized electron, causing the solid to transition from being a metal or a conductor moving electrons to be an insulator. While the states of localization has been explored for decades in the context of single non-interacting particles, what happens in a disorder system with multiple interacting electrons? Questions like this are related experts of quantum chaos word on the minds of Weld and his co-author, University of Maryland theorist Victor Gelitsky, during a discussion several years ago when Gelitsky was visiting Saint Barbara. What Victor raised was the question of what happens if instead of the pure non-interacting quantum system, which is stabilized by interference, you have a bunch of these rotors, and they can all bump into and interact with each other. Well recalled, does the localization persist or is it destroyed by the interactions? Indeed, it is a very difficult question that relates to a foundation of statistical mechanics and the basic notion of ergodicity, whereby most interacting system eventually thermalize into a universal state, said Gillespie. Imagine for a moment pouring cold milk into hot coffee. The particles in your cup will, over time and through their interactions, arrange themselves into a uniform equilibrium state that is neither purely hot coffee or cold milk. Cold milk. This type of behavior, thermalization, was expected of all interacting systems. That is until about 16 years ago, when it was argued that disorder in a quantum system was thought to result in many body localization (MBL). This phenomena, which was recognized by the Lars Onsager Prize earlier this year, is difficult to rigorously prove the theoretical for or established experimental, Gillespie says. Wells Group had the technology and expertise to shed light on the situation. Literally in their labs is a gas of 1000 ultra cold lithium atoms suspended in a standing waves of light. Each atom represents a quantum rotor that can be kicked by laser pulses. We can use a tool called a flashback resonance to keep the atom clogged from each other, or we can make them bounce off each other with arbitrarily strong interaction. Well said. With a turn of knob, the researcher could make the lithium atoms go from line dance to mosh pit and capture their behaviors. As expected, when the atoms were invincible to each other, they look the laser kicking up to a certain point, after which they stop moving in their dynamically localized state despite repeated kicks. But when the researcher dialed up the interaction, not only did the localized state diminish, but the system appeared to absorb energy from the repeated kicks, mimicking classical chaotic behavior. However, Weld pointed out, while the interacting disorder quantum system was absorbing energy, it was doing so at a much slower rate than would a classical system. What we are seeing is something that absorbs energy, but not as well as a classical system can, he said. At it seems like the energy is growing. Roughly with the square root of time instead of linearly with time. So the interaction aren't making it classical. It's still a weird quantum state exhibiting anomalous non-localization. Testing for chaos. Welch's team used a technique called echo, in which the kinetic evolution is run forward and then backwards to directly measures the way in which interaction destroy time reversibility. This destruction of time reversibility is a key signature of quantum chaos. Another way to think about this is to ask how much energy of initial states does the system have after some time. And said co-author Roshan Sajad, a graduate student researcher on the lithium team. In the absence of the perturbation such as stray light as or gas collisions, he explained the system should be able to return to its initial states if the physics is run backward. In our experiment, we reverse time by reversing the phase of the cakes, undoing the effects of the first normal set of cakes, he said. Part of our fascination was the different theories that had predicted different behaviors on the outcome of this type of interacting setup, but no one had ever done the experiment. The rough idea of chaos is that even though the laws of motion are time reversible, a many particle system can be so complicated and sensitive to perturbation that is practically impossible to return to its initial state. Said lead author Alec Kyo, the twist was that in an effectively disordered localized state, the interaction broke the localization somewhat, even as the system lost its capacity to be time reversed, he explained. N- Naively, you did expect interaction to ruin time reversal, but we saw something more interesting. A little bit of interaction actually helps, suggest added. This was one of the more surprising results of this work. Weld and Gillespie weren't the only ones to witness this fuzzy quantum state. University of Washington physicist Subhadip Gupta and his team ran an complementary experiment at the same time, producing similar results using heavier atoms in one-dimensional context. That result is published alongside those of UC Santa Barbara and University of Maryland in Nature Physics. The experiment at UW operated in very difficult physical regime with 25 times heavier atoms restricted to move in one dimension only, yet only measured weaker than linear energy growth from periodic kicking, shedding light on an area where the theoretical results have been in conflict, said Gupta, whose group collaborated with the theorist Chenwei Zheng and his team at the University of Texas in Dallas. These findings, like many important physics results, open up more questions and pave the way for more quantum chaos experiments where the coveted link between classical and quantum physics may be uncovered. David experiment in his first attempt to be probe a dynamically version of MBL in a more controlled laboratory setting, Gillespie commented. While it has not unobviously resolved the fundamental question one way or another, the data show something strange is going on. How can we understand these results in the context of the very large body of the work on many body localization in condensed matter systems? Weld asked, how can we characterize this state of matter? We observe that the system is delocalizing, but not with the expected linear time dependence. What's going on there? We are looking forward to future experiments exploring these and other questions. So these are the findings given by the physicist on various topics, as well as in the quantum computer, in the and many parts of the sorry in the quantum computer itself, and in the electrons, or used in many applications, of course, because it's going to provide in many, yes, many applications, of course. Okay, moving on towards next topic. Team of physicists find signs of penta quark states and new matter. Hmm. Theoretists at the University of Pittsburgh and Swansea University have shown that recent experimental results from CERN collider give strong evidence for a new form of matter. The experiment at CERN, site of the world highest energy particle collider, examined a heavy particle called a lambda b that decays to light particles, including the familiar proton and the famed GPSI discovered in 1974. In a paper published online today, is physical review. D physicist Tim Burns of Swansea in Wales and Eric Swanson at Pitt argue that the data can be understood only if a new type of matter exists. Most of the observable mass of the universe comes from particles called quarks that combines to make the familiar proton and neutron and a bevy of other particles that interact far more strongly than electrons or neutrons. These strongly interacting particles are known collectively as hadrons, described in quantum chromodynamics theory. Even though this theory is nearing its 50th birthday, it remains notoriously difficult to discern its inner working. Quantum chromodynamics is the problem child of the standard model, Swanson said. Learning what it shows about hadrons requires running the world's fastest computer for years, making it difficult to answer the dozens of questions this single experiment raises. For this reason, doing experiment with hadrons and correctly interpreting the results is vital to understanding quantum chromodynamics. Until recently, all hadrons could be understood as combination of a quark and an anti-quark, like the JPSI, or combination of the three quarks like the proton. In spite of this, it has been long been suspected that other quark combinations are possible, what amounts to new forms of matter. Then in 2004 came the discovery of a particle called the X3872, which seemed to be a combination of two quarks and two antiquarks. Other candidate novelties have come along since then, although none of them can be defi- definitively identified as exotic new combination of quarks. Sometimes a bump in the data is wonderful new thing, and sometimes it is just a bump, Swanson said. The new work combines the CERN data with other experiments from 218 and 2019 to arrive at a consistent explanation for all the findings. We have a model that explains the data beautifully and for the first time incorporates all the experimental constraints. Bond says the explanation requires the existence of a several new particles that consist of four quarks and one antiquark called pentaquarks. The research also indicated that the pentaquarks are just at the threshold for being observed at other laboratories. There is really no other way to interrupt the data. Pentaquark states must exist, said Burns. The conclusion raises the possibility that other pentaquarks are possible and that a whole new class of matter is at the cusp of being discovered. Hmm. Okay. Moving on towards the next topic, artificial intelligence reduces a 1 lakh equation quantum physics problem to only 4 questions. Interesting, right? Let's see. Using artificial intelligence, physicists has compressed a daunting quantum problem that until now required 100,000 equation into a bit size task of a few as 4 equation, all without sacrificing accuracy. The work published in the September 23 issue of Physical Reviews letters could revolutionize how scientists investigate systems containing many interacting electrons. Moreover, if scalable to other problems, the approach could potentially aid in the design of materials which sought after properties such as superconductivity or utility for clean energy generation. We start with this huge object of all the coupled together differential equation, then we are using machine learning to turn it into something so small you can count it on your fingers, says study lead author Domencio Di Sante, a visiting research fellow at the Fullerton Institute Center for Computation and Physics (CCQ) in New York City, and assistant professor at the University of Bologna in Italy. The formidable problem concerns how electrons behave as they move a grid like lattice. When two electrons occupy the same lattice side, they interact. The setup known as the Hubbard's models is an idealization of several important classes of material and enable scientists to learn how electron behaviors gives rise to sort after phases of matter such as superconductivity in which electron flow through a material without resistance. The model also serves as a testing ground for new methods before they are unleashed on more complex quantum systems. The Hubbard model is deceptively simple, however, for even a modest number of electrons and cutting edge computational approaches, the problem requires serious computing power. That's because when electrons interact, their fates can become quantum mechanical entangled. Uh, Even once there are far apart on different lattice sides, the two electrons can be treated individually. So physicists must deal with all the electrons at once rather than once at a time, one at a time. With more electron and more atoms crop up, making the computational challenge exponentially harder. One way of studying quantum system is by using what's called a renormalization group. That's the mathematical apparatus physicists use to look at how the behavior of the system, such as the Hilbert's model, changes when scientists modify properties such as temperature or look at the properties on different scales. Unfortunately, a renormalization group that keeps track of all possible couplings between electrons and doesn't sacrifice anything can contain uh, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of individual equations that need to be solved. On top of that, the equations are tricky. Each represent a pair of electrons interacting. D. Sante and his colleague wondered if they could use a machine learning tool known as a null, n- neural network to make the renormalization group more manageable. The neural network is the like a cross between a frantic switchboard operator and survival of the fittest evolution. First, the machine learning program creates a connection within the full size renormalization group. The neural network that tweaks the strength of those connections until it finds a small step of equation that generates the same solution as the original jumbo size renormalization group. The program output captured the Hubbard's model physics even with just four equations. It's essentially a machine that has the power to discover hidden patterns, DeSantis says. When we saw the result, we said, wow, this is more than what we expected. We were really able to capture the relevant physics, of course. Training the machine learning program required a lot of computation muscles and program ran for entire weeks. The good news, DeSantis is that now that they have their program coached, they can adapt it to work on other programs without having to start from scratch. He and his collaborators are also investigating just what the machine learning is actual learning about the system, which could provide additional insights that might otherwise be hard for physicists to decipher. Ultimately, the biggest open question is how well the new approach works on more complex quantum systems, such as materials in which electrons interact at long distances. In addition, there are exciting possibilities for using the technique in other fields that deals with renormalization group descendants such as cosmology and neuroscience. Okay, great. So, of course, moving on towards next topic because we are running of the we have to cover lots of news. Tiny sea creature genes shed light on evolution of immunity. How tiny marine invertebrate distinguishes its own cells for competitors bears striking similarities to the human immune system, according to a new study led by the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine researchers. The finding published now in Proceeding of the National Academy of Sciences suggests that the building blocks of our immune system evolved much earlier than previously thought and could help improve understanding of transplant rejection, one day guiding development of new immunotherapies. Wondered for decades, researchers have wondered whether self-recognition in a marine creature called Hydrocrinchia symbiolo, Symbionocarpus was a keen to process that control whether a piece of skin can be successfully grafted from one person to another, said senior author Matthew Kotora, PhD assistant professor of surgery and immunology at the Thomas E. Strelzai Transplantations Institute. A study shows for the first time that a special group of proteins called the immunoglobulin superfamily, which are important for adaptive immunity in mammals and other vertebrates, are found in such a distantly related animal. Hydrangeia carpus belongs to the same group of as jellyfish, corals, and sea anemones with tubes-like bodies adorned with tentacles for catching prey. The animals look a bit like a tiny version of wacky inflatable tube man dancing outside of a car dealership. They grow as colonies encrusting the shells of hermit crabs like lichen on a rock. As colonies grows and compete for space or on crab shells, they often bump into each other, explained Nicotera, who is also associate director of the Center for Evolutionary Biology and Medicines in Pittsburgh School of Medicines. If two colonies recognize each other as self, they fuse together, but if they identify each other as non self, the colonies fight by releasing harpoon like structure from special cells. Nicotora and his colleagues previously identified two genes called ALR1 and ALR2 involved in hydro share fuse or fight a system, but they predicted that they were more to the story. If you imagine that the genome of the animal is spread out in front of us, we had a flashlight on these two little points when we don't know what else was there. Said Negatara, now we have been able to sequence the whole genome and eliminate the whole region around these genes. It turns out the AR1 and AR2 are a part of a huge family of genes. In the new study, the researcher identified the sequence 41 ALR genes, which form a complex that likely control self versus and non-self recognition in hydrangeia. Next, the team wanted to see how the proteins and AR genes encode compared to those found in vertebrates. Until recently, it was nearly impossible to accurately predict the 3D structure of proteins based on a gene sequence. But in 2021, the release of a tool called AlphaFold changed that. Using this tool, the researcher compared the structure of ALR proteins to immunoglobulin superfamily IGSF protein, an important group that includes antibodies and receptors on B and T cells of the immune system. IGSF proteins have three characteristic regions or domains, include the V set domain. Okay, the V stands for variable, said Nicotera. When a B or T cells becomes specialized to fight a particular pathogen, V set domains are re-engineered to make a variable sequence which the immune system uses to recognize specific pathogens or cells. Nicotera was surprised to find the domains in ALR proteins had a 3D structure remarkably similar to V set domains, even though they lacked tactical features usual found in IGSF proteins. Unmistakably, these are V set domains, he explained. They are just very strange. Until now, it was thought that visa domains had arisen in the branch of the animal kingdom known as Bilateria. This group originated about 540 million years ago and includes most familiar animals, including mammals, insects, fish, mollusks, and all others with right and left sides. The finding of Visa domains in Hydrangea, which is part of a group that appeared earlier in the evolution of animals, suggests that Visa domains arose further back in the evolutionary tree than previously thought. Several layer proteins also had signature associated with the immune signaling in other animals, another clue that this protein complex is involved in self recognition. We know lots other uh, we know a lot about the immune system of mammals and other vertebrate, but we have only scratched the surface of immunity in vertebrates, said Nicotera. We think that's a better understanding of immune signaling in organisms like Hydrangea could ultimately point to alternative ways to manipulate those signaling pathways in patients with transplant organs. Other authors who contributed to the study were Aiden Lee Hyun, PhD, Stephen M. Sanders, PhD, Silvio MA, BS, Manuel H. Mecca, BS, all of Pitt, Endo, Nguyen, Sergi Coron, PhD, Adam Me, Philippi, PhD, and Andreas D. Bensvens, PhD of all of the other National Human Genome Research Institute NHGRI, James C. Milliken, PhD of the NHGRI and the National Institute of Health NIH, and the Christine E. Sinchler, PhD of the University of Florida. Interesting. So these are the findings of ours and given by the scientists to have evolution of immunity cells in our human body. Yes, of course. Moving on towards next and the last topic of this podcast, NASA DART spacecraft crashes into asteroid in defense test. Hmm. A NASA spacecraft rammed on asteroid at blistering speed Monday in an unprecedented dress rehearsal for the day a killer rock menaces Earth. The galactic scam occurred at a harmless asteroid 7 million miles 11.3 million kilometers away, with the spacecraft named DART plowing into the space rock at 1400 14,000, sorry, 14, okay, sorry, into the space rock at 1400 meter per hour, 22,500 kilometer per hour. Scientists expected the impacts to carve out a crater, hurl streams of rocks and dirt into space, and most importantly, alter the asteroid orbits. We have impact. Missions Control Elena Adams announced, jumping up and down and thrusting her arms skyward. Telescopes around the world and in space aimed at this same point in the sky to capture the spectacle. Though the impact was immediately obvious, DART radio signal abruptly ceased. It will take as long as a couple of months to determine how much the asteroid path was changed. The 325 million mission. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, okay. Telescopes around the world are in the space aimed at the same point in the sky to capture the spectacle. Through the impact was immediately obvious. DART's radio signal abruptly ceased. It will take as long as a couple of months to determine how much the asteroid path was changed. The $325 million mission was the first attempt to shift the position of an asteroid or any other natural object in space. As far as we can tell, our first planetary defense test was a success, Adams later told a news conference, the room filling with applause. I think Earthlings should sleep better. Definitely, I will. NASA Administrator Bill Lanson reminded peoples earlier in the day via Twitter that no, this is not a movie plot. He added in a pre recorded video, we have all seen in it on movies like Armag- Armageddon, but the real life stakes are high. Okay. Monday's targets a 525-foot, 160 meter asteroid named Dimorphos. It's a moonlet of Didymos Creek of Twin, a fast spinning asteroid 5 times bigger that flung off the material that formed the junior partner. The pair have been orbiting the sun of eons without threatening Earth, making them ideal save the world test candidates. Launched last November, the vending machine sized dart, short for double asteroid redirection test, navigated to its target using new technology developed by Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, the spacecraft builder and mission manager. DART's onboard camera, a key part of the smart navigation system, caught signs of Dimorphos barely an hour before impact. Woohoo! Explained Adams, a mission system engineer at Johns Hopkins. With an image beaming back to Earth every second, Adams and other ground controllers in Lauderdale, Maryland, watched with growing excitement as Dimorphos loomed larger and larger in the field of view alongside its bigger companion. Within minutes, Dimorphos was alone in the pictures. It looked like giant grey lemon, but with boulders and rubble on the surface. The last image froze on the screen as the radio transmission ended. Flight controller cheered, hugged one another, and exchanged high fives. Their mission complete. The DART team went straight into celebration mode. There were little sorrow over the spacecraft demise. Normally, losing signal from a spacecraft is a very bad timing, but in this case, it was the ideal outcome. Okay, said NASA program scientist Tom Stadler. Johns Hopkins scientist Carolyn Ernst said the spacecraft was definitely kaput, kaput with the remnants uh, possibly in the fresh crater or cascading into space with the asteroid ejected material. Scientists insisted that would not shatter Dimorphos. The spacecraft packed a scant 1,260 pounds, 57 kilograms, compared with the asteroid's 11 billion pounds, 5 billion kilograms that should be planted to shrink its 11-hour 55 minutes orbit around Didymos. The impact should pair 10 minutes of that. The anticipated orbital shift of 1% might not sound like much, scientists noted, but they stressed it would amount to be significant change over years. Now is when the science starts, said NASA Lori Glaze, Planetary Science Division Director. Now we are going to see for real how effective we were. Planetary defense experts prefer nudging a threatening asteroid or comet out of the way given enough lead time rather than blowing it up and creating multiple pieces that could rain down on Earth. Multiple impactors might be needed for big space rocks or a combination of impactors and so called gravity tractors, and not yet invented devices that would use their own gravity to pull an asteroid into an unsafe orbit. The dinosaurs didn't have a space program to help them know what was coming, but we do. NASA senior climate advisor Catherine Calvin said, referring to the mass extinction 66 million years ago, believed to have been caused by a major asteroid impact, volcanic eruption, or both. The non-profit B612 Foundation dedication to protecting Earth from asteroid strikes has been pushing for impacts tests like that since its founding by astronaut and physicist 20 years ago. Monday's featured aside, the world must do a better job of identifying the countless space rocks luring out there, warned the foundation executive disorder E.D. Liu, a former astronaut. Significantly less than a half of the estimated 25,000 near Earth objects in the deadly 46 foot 140-meter range have been discovered according to NASA, and fewer than 1% of the millions of smaller asteroids capable of widespread injuries are known. The Vera Rubin The Vera Rubin Observatory, nearing the completion in the child by the National Science Foundation and the U.S. Energy Department, promises to revolutionize the field of asteroid discovery. Liu noted, finding and tracking asteroids, that's still the name of the games here. That's the thing that has to happen in order to protect the Earth, he said. Okay. So this is the one of the best examples, one of the greatest examples he's given to us, and providing the results of in front of them. And of course, a few podcasts earlier, we have already discussed this article news that how a NASA scientist going to be dart on a or asteroid to of course uh, change the orbit and moving to the another space of orbit uh, instead of extension of dinosaurs, of course. So these are the findings again providing by this scientist who keep on researching without resting it. So yep, that's all for this podcast. And yes, we have many times we have given to you that we have started that newsletter providing you the articles that is not, or providing in the information that is not easily available on the surface web and will be provided to you by our sources, and by the genuine sources, of course. uh, so uh, also we will provide the backlinks and everything. So there is not the conspiracy theory or a theorist. We are only based on facts and figures. So If you are interested in that kind of information, please do subscribe to our newsletter. Otherwise, leave it. We will provide this podcast on a daily basis, and that's enough for us. So, yep. At the last, keep researching, stay curious, stay healthy.